The Holocaust is so immense that it can't be grasped in its entirety. Therefore, it has to be grasped in its specificity. Image by image, fact by fact, moment by moment, story by story.
I was afraid. I was aware that after I passed the gate, the only way will be to the gas chambers.
And what becomes interesting is to see the specific within its larger context.
If you seat 1,000 people in freight cars, and that means you need 25 freight cars.
If you go behind each photograph,
in the frame of the photographs, you can actually see the window of the frame and the bodies being burnt.
if you go behind each document,
there was not one sector in Germany which could say we weren't involved. It was in each and every aspect of society.
you get a much larger story.
The Nazis introduced a revolution to this world. They introduced a new concept, a new possibility. They introduced the possibility of wiping another people off the face of the earth.
How do we make the Holocaust relevant for the 21st century? It would be my deepest dream that the Holocaust were irrelevant.
I think the difficult thing for people to grapple with emotionally about the Holocaust is how could a group of people be so hated and seen as so dangerous for who they were that one had to come to the conclusion that they had to be eliminated from the face of the earth.
To understand the Holocaust, you have to understand 6 words. Definition, expropriation, concentration, Einsatzgruppen, deportation, death camps. Definition. Normally we define Jews on the basis of the identity they held, the traditions they practiced, the beliefs that they embody in their lives. The Germans defined the Jews biologically based on the religion of their grandparents.
When the regime came to power in January 1933, part of the Nazi movement, the aggressive radical part, the most extreme part, wanted to just expunge the Jews overnight. What they did was they began to legislate against the Jews. And rapidly, the Jews were kicked out of not only the civil service, but of areas of society where there were many Jews: education, universities, teachers, lawyers, doctors. The Jews became something that was not needed. The climax of this early period of legislation was the Nuremberg laws. The laws were there to determine officially, as the title said, citizenship in Germany. Who is a citizen and who is not? But the only definitions that were given of who is a citizen were definitions for who is not a citizen. And the only people defined as not citizens of Germany were Jews. Jews were forced to add the name Israel as a middle name for a man and Sarah as a middle name for a woman from the middle of 1938.
In other times in history, Jews could convert, they could hide themselves by assimilating within the host country. But under racial theory during the Nazi period, Jews were Jews because of the blood that was coursing through their veins. It didn't matter what was in their heart or in their mind, it mattered what was in their blood. So the ultimate extension of this theory was that if you wanted to rid Jews, you couldn't do it through conversion as they did during the Inquisition. You couldn't do it in any other way than to murder them.
There's this gigantic paper trail that goes right down to books for children in schools and popular films and all sorts of things that the Nazis did that didn't always relate directly to the Jews or might relate directly to the Jews, but were part of a comprehensive view of the world in which the Jews not only had no place, but the Jews were almost the anti-human, the anti-German, the anti-Aryan in this world, playing a negative role, and therefore they have a place. They have a place until ultimately they're not going to be there anymore.
Expropriation, the confiscation of Jewish wealth, the removal of Jewish property, the registration of all assets, the inability of Jews to own homes, property. After the Jews were sent off, people moved into their homes, took over their businesses. So on some level, the local populations understood these people were not coming back. They didn't ask why they're not coming back, but they sure as hell knew that they were not coming back.
One of the German artifacts that is most striking for me personally in our historical museum, it's a game called Juden raus, Jews out. It's a game that was created in Germany in 1936, the same year that Monopoly was created in the United States. And it was created just like Monopoly. It's a family game. It says on it, on the box, it's a game for people aged 8 to 99. So multi-generational families can sit down together at the coffee table, put the game down there and play. It's a game where you have a piece, you roll the dice, you move around the board, you collect things, and the one who collects the most during the game wins the game. What are you collecting? You're collecting how many Jews you've evicted from your country.
I came across one document. It was just a letter of a non-Jewish woman writing to her mother-in-law about Reichskristallnacht, the November pogrom. At the beginning of the letter, you get the impression that she feels pity with the Jews because she says that what happened to them and that the Nazi mob came in and plundered the Jewish apartments and so on. But then the tone changes somehow, and she describes that from what was thrown from the Jewish apartments onto the street, she has realized how much the Jews possessed, and that they possessed things that the non-Jews didn't have or didn't have enough of. And then she says, now the Jews have to leave this place, and we also don't know where they go now, but probably they will be brought to a concentration camp until a definite solution will be found.
Zurück nach Polen. Das schwierigste Problem, vor das sich unsere Zivilverwaltung in den besetzten Gebieten gestellt sieht, ist die Judenfrage. Dieses ostjüdische Untermenschentum hat seit jeher Westeuropa das internationale Verbrechergesindel geliefert.
By the time the war began, in September of '39, there were not that many Jews left in Germany. And the desire to rid Europe of its Jews really that opportunity only came with conquest of territories where the Jews lived, and that began in Poland in September of 1939. It's not simply, not only lives that were lost, it was entire communities, it was a way of life in some cases.
The Holocaust was unimaginable, and it involved using all of the knowledge and the insight the 20th century humanity had in order to define, expropriate, concentrate, and ultimately murder and annihilate and destroy and also take possession of their wealth and their homes, an entire population. And even as great and as well-connected a man as Allen Dulles, who was then with the OSS and later became head of our CIA, Allen Dulles, when he was informed of the death camps, had a very interesting response. He said, so it's true. He had had all the details. He had every piece of information floating through American government intelligence, but he couldn't imagine that that was what was happening.
We have liberation photographs, we have uniforms, we have all sorts of things in our collection. I think the bullets are the only things that we have in our collection that I know of that did that. We have the actual thing that killed someone. 15,000 someones.
You can read about the Holocaust, you can study it, you can read the documents, but when you look at this object, the actual bullet that murdered an individual, everything else seems to disappear in a way, because that was the agent, that was the absolute cause of the death of an individual. And in that sense, it is an irreplaceable experience to look at that bullet and to contemplate what it did.
Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units. This is men who slaughter wantonly entire villages, towns, communities, person by person, town by town, bullet by bullet, day by day. No concealment, blatant and brutal, and no effort to disguise what they were doing or what their intentions.
In June of 1941, the Germans invaded the Soviet Union. And by the end of the summer of 1941, there was a wholesale, large-scale murder by individual shooting of a huge number of people. The Einsatzgruppen were essentially mobile offices of the Reich Security Main Office. And at the beginning of the summer of 1941, began to shoot the men in the villages and cities. The operations continued throughout the summer of 1941, and sometime toward the end of the summer, the nature of the victim changed. Not only were men being killed, but also their wives and mothers and sisters and their children. And by the end of the summer of 1941, there was a wholesale, large-scale murder by individual shooting of a huge number of people.
The Germans engaged in killing methods that were suitable to the geographical, transportation, and public relations context of the area in which they were operating. When it was more efficient to shoot Jews where they were and other victims, the Germans shot them where they were.
One of the pictures taken at what was thought to be an Einsatzgruppen killing shows a soldier pointing a gun at a woman who has a child in her arms. On the back of the photograph is captioned in German, Ivangorod, Ukraine, 1942, Jewish action. This picture was actually found, intercepted in fact, at Warsaw's main post office, where commonly resistance workers opened the letters belonging to German soldiers who were writing letters and sending them from the Eastern Front to their families back home in Germany.
The fact that this photographer, who knew what was happening to these people, knew what was going to happen to them, calmly recorded their last moments is one of the most chilling, I don't even know what the word is. He possessed the knowledge of their immediate future, their death, and had the calm to focus his camera to make sure that he set the f-stop properly and clicked the shutter. This is, it says something about, I believe, the nature of these operations.
When we thought of how to portray the mobile killing units and the dead at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, we came up with a very contrarian view of what to show. If we had shown dead bodies piled high and the mass graves, one would have understood that something horrific had happened, but one would have never understood the nature of the crime. So what we did instead was to create a tower of faces. We didn't want to show you the dead. We wanted to show you essentially the living and let you imagine what was and is no longer. The Jews of one town, the town is Eshishuk in Lithuania, were killed on the third day of the Jewish New Year. They had been gathered in the synagogue for Rosh Hashanah, for the Jewish New Year. And they were kept in the synagogue, and then they were marched out of the synagogue to the killing field, the rabbi and the elders of the community leading the way, and then they were killed one by one by one. But instead of showing you the dead, we show you the living. A family picnic. A little child on a chair in a naval uniform. The mother embracing her child. All of this life eradicated in one day. Concentration. But first, let's think of concentration not as concentration camps. Let's think of it as reservations that were created to contain the Jews. To contain the Jews until, though all victims ultimately suffered the same fate in the death camps, they arrived there differently, and they arrived there in different conditions. In Poland, the process of ghettoization lasted from 1939 or early 1940 till 1942 and 43. So by the time Jews arrived there, they were already emaciated and without any material resources. So here you had in Warsaw, for example, a ghetto that was located on 2.4% of land of the city of Warsaw, but contained 1/3 of its population, that swelled to at times almost as high as 500,000 people, and it became something that the German soldiers were attracted to seeing.
The Nazi film crews frequented the Warsaw Ghetto, taking pictures for their own propaganda purposes. They were crews who came and filmed both the poverty and the better off in the ghetto. So they were known to pick people off the streets who looked well dressed and take them into restaurants that showed lots of food and abundance and drinks and so on. And they were made to sit and sound animated, looked happy and pleased, and eat and drink and so on. They also showed the very poor ghetto Jews in accommodations where they were living that showed extreme poverty. They showed people dead in the gutter, sometimes stripped naked, and so on.
There are those who believe that the Holocaust was born whole. I'm not of that school. I see an awful lot of improvisation. I see an awful lot of experimentation. I see an awful lot of starts and stops, of failures and then of innovation. For example, concentration camps were developed very early. They served multiple functions. One of them was penal colonies, places to arrest massive numbers. The other function of the concentration camps was to essentially provide slave labor and forced labor for German industry.
The prisoners were somehow marked to what the Nazis said is the incarceration reason. These reasons are always reasons which were somehow invented. So what you see there, it's a chart from the concentration camp of Dachau. And you have something like here, political prisoner. You have like a triangle in red, because their enemies were Reds, like Social Democrats, Communists, etc. Like if someone was imprisoned as a political person, like a Social Democrat, and he was Jewish as well, he got this sign. And it's very somehow cynical that these signs for Jews who were combined of a yellow label, a yellow triangle, and another colored triangle, together they were formed into a Star of David.
There is a whole complete album of 92 photos which the SS took for the reason of wanting to show how fantastic the system of a concentration camp can function. Kind of awkward or bizarre document, because it documents not the reality of Ravensbrück, but the way the SS wanted to represent Ravensbrück concentration camp. One thing that I found and still find really surprising is in the function of SS guards, how they changed. They came the first day, they used to say hello to everybody and how are you, and they had their civilized modes of moving around. And then after 3-4 days, they learned to de-civilize in a certain way, to change their whole way of moving around, and then they started to act like SS guards. You put them into a certain surrounding, and then step by step you can change a human being, you can change civilized ways of moving about into a terrible system of torture and finally even atrocity.
One of the reasons I've always dismissed the defense of we were just following orders is because I don't think it gives an awareness of the creativity involved in doing something that was unprecedented and until that moment never before achieved.
The Nazis developed their own lexicon for many things. Instead of murder, you have words like special treatment or special handling. I think of special treatment, special handling, I think of a postal package, and they're thinking of taking 1,000 Jews and taking them out and shooting them. Resettlement, relocation, beyond the river, beyond the mountains, all sorts of terms like that. Lurking behind those terms was genocide of the Jewish people.
The
This is a letter that was thrown from a train at the end of August 1942 by Dr. Otto Simmons. This portion says, "My dears, we are on our way to Poland. Nothing has helped. There are 50 of us in one car. Stay strong and be brave and courageous, and I will be also. I was stripped of everything. Kisses, Otto." That's the last record that we have of Otto Simmons. The letter doesn't get to Otto's wife without the help of an anonymous French railway worker who writes here, "Dear Madame, I found this letter after one of the trains with Jews on it passed by, and I hope that this pleases you." And it's signed a railway worker. And in this case, you're thinking about it, it's 1942. It's relatively early in the war. It's relatively early in the Holocaust in Western Europe. But this railway worker already knows that it was a train of Jews that passed by.
On January 20th, 1942, 80% of the Jews who were to die in the Holocaust were still alive. 16 months later, 4 out of 5 of the Jews who were to die in the Holocaust were already dead. What happened at the Wannsee Conference essentially was the enunciation of the policy, the final solution to the Jewish problem, meaning the murder of all Jews.
The SS bought this house in 1940 as a guest house and as a conference house. They all knew that there was already a mass murder going on in Eastern Europe. No real details had been discussed here at the Wannsee Conference. It was an information on the general line that a decision had been made to kill all European Jews. It is also the moment that the whole German society became involved.
Well, you can see the Wannsee Conference, and of course the place where it took place becomes a symbol, an icon for the premeditated, planned murder of European Jewry. And so in many ways the conference is the symbol of how desk murderers operated, those who had no connection with people and blood carried out their work.
And what you have here, it's the whole organization of the Holocaust starts. This is the guidelines for deportations from Germany to the east. How to deport the Jews, what to do before, what to do with them during the ride on the train, etc. The whole involvement of administration, of banks, of transportation. So there was not one sector in Germany which could say, oh no, we weren't involved in deportation or in the Holocaust. But here you see it was in each and every aspect of society. There was involvement in the Holocaust and in the robbery of those deported.
Deportation. Trains have become a symbol of the Holocaust almost as dramatically as the death camps. Railroads represent what is a novum, the new way of killing that the Nazis invented. In retrospect, the ghettos were a holding pen. They were a reservation containing the Jews until the infrastructure for their destruction was created. Trains became the indispensable link, taking the ghettoized Jews who had been concentrated, who had been deported so they were forced together. And then what happens to them? Trains, deportation, annihilation.
It's no accident that Auschwitz was located where it was. It was on a major rail artery between Krakow and Vienna, and Without that infrastructure, they would never have selected Auschwitz as the site for a major facility. Same holds true for Treblinka and Sobibor and Belzec.
There was not a particular assignment of a particular type of locomotive. They were using mostly freight engines, which ran at a top speed of 80 kilometers. Now, when a train came in with 50 or 60 cars, very soon they had a method of splitting the train into portions of 10 to 15 cars, so that not so many people would get out of the cars when they were driven into the camp. Up to 8,000 or 10,000 people were transported in one day. So the average speed is like 20, 25 kilometers per hour. Freight cars were taken because you could lock them from the outside. You seat 40 in a freight car. Now, if you seat 1,000 people, that means you need 20 to 25 freight cars. Within Poland, the figure was different. The police asked the railways to provide them with a train for 5,000 people. And the maximum number of cars you may have, due to regulations, within a train is 60 cars, 120 axles. So that's 50 to 60 cars, and that means roughly 100 to 110 people in one car. Deportation trains normally over Western Europe and over Germany were regularly accompanied by a detachment of 12 to 15 policemen and one officer. Now, Saturday, even for the SS, was a half day at the time, and they arranged for the railways to keep the Jews into the train until Monday morning, when they had a full day of operation and their weekend was not spoiled by the arrival of the deportation train.
One of the true horrors of the Holocaust is the mental energy, the managerial skill, the fingertip feeling in deploying and utilizing scarce resources to the best possible effect that was applied to this project to eliminate the Jews of Europe. If you step back from the ultimate goal, the talents, the energy, the imagination that the perpetrators of the Holocaust applied to completing their project are generally the types of characteristics that we in the middle class admire in terms of getting jobs done.
Mark Twain once said there are truth, lies, and statistics. But I think that Twain was wrong because statistics reveal essential truths about the Holocaust. And sometimes the very starkness of the statistics reveal the largest of all stories. You want to know Hungarian Jewry? 437,402 Jews, 147 trains, 54 days between the 15th of May and the 8th of July. You want to understand the deportation from the Warsaw Ghetto? 23rd of July, 21st of September, again 61 days, 265,000 Jews shipped to Treblinka. You want to understand Belzec, Jews killed? A staff of 104, 14 of them German, 2 known survivors. The statistics tell a brutal, painful, specific and unavoidable truth. Death camps. I was involved in the reconstruction of the memorial at Auschwitz. And part of what we discovered underneath in the mass graves of Auschwitz, we discovered something, a key. Series of keys. Now, we don't ordinarily think of the key as a powerful artifact, but let me tell you a little bit about what a key represents. The victim left home one morning and fully expected someday to return to that home, and that home would still be there, he would still be alive, and it would still be safe. And when you die with your keys, then when you're buried with your keys, you understand that he never imagined, or she never imagined, what fate was awaiting them.
The Nazi system of concentration camps is often misunderstood. Many people conflate the notion of death camp and concentration camp, and they believe that having been sent to a concentration camp was essentially a death sentence. That's not true. There were many survivors of concentration camps, and there were very few survivors of death camps.
Sobor is located in a very remote part of Poland. But it was a site so eerie and so spooky that essentially, even while the Holocaust was taking place, the Germans decided that this place could never be seen, could never be known. So they eradicated the entire camp, they buried the entire camp.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe 7 here. Yes, 7 is 2. Okay.
On the question of what Adolf Hitler knew about the Holocaust, for example. A very interesting question. What did Hitler know about Auschwitz? Well, of course he knew. He was the one who gave the order. And I said, yes, but what's the evidence? And Hillgruber, who I'm interviewing, Professor Hillgruber says, well, I had it from Professor Jekyll. Professor Jekyll says, but I had it from Professor Jacobson. And Professor Jacobson said, yes, but I had it from Professor Brochard. And I asked Professor Brochard, and he said, I had it from Hillgruber. So the circle is complete. They've all been quoting each other like dogs running around in a circle, sniffing each other's tails. And of course, it has no basis on hard fact at all. It's just like the Goodyear blimp I saw floating around this afternoon here. It's got no contact with the ground. It's just got the one word written on the side, Hitler gave the order. 2 words, 3 words. Hitler gave the order. And they've got no evidence for it at all. And of course, when I said, well, okay, let's see the actual evidence. Let's see the documents. Here's $1,000 if you can find one single wartime contemporary document showing Hitler even knew what was going on. Surely that should be simple. That's one where you don't have to kind of infer something or agree that this was a euphemism or something like that. Let's see one explicit